In this episode, we speak with Shyam Rajagopalan, co-founder and technology lead of Infinitus Systems, a company using voice AI agents to automate clinical and administrative tasks, easing the burden on healthcare staff and improving patient outcomes. Shyam is a hands-on technology leader who works closely with his team on everything from coding to product design. His collaborative approach is central to Infinitus's mission and product innovation. The company supports 44% of the Fortune 50 and has helped more than 125,000 healthcare providers, making a measurable impact on healthcare operations through safety-first AI. I'm your host, RJ Lumba. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you like the episode, click to follow.
RJ Lumba is the executive chairman of Market Insight Media and the managing partner of GrowthCap. He is the host of Great Entrepreneurs, a podcast for driven entrepreneurs and business owners. Our podcast covers all topics related to the entrepreneurial journey, from ideation to execution to optimization and to reaping the rewards of a well-run business. In the minutes ahead, we'll share with you unique insights and tactics from some of today's most accomplished and inspiring entrepreneurs.
Hi, Shyam. Great to be with you today. It's a delight to chat.
Hey, RJ. Great to connect as well.
So where I'd like to start is this whole area of AI within the healthcare context. And your solution is addressing an area that is very prevalent in terms of the amount of volume of conversations that happen between, provider and patient and then other types of those conversations. Can you tell us about maybe where this started? Because your background was not necessarily, it didn't seem like it was focused on healthcare. So tell us about the genesis of the idea.
So first of all, my CEO and co-founder at Infinitus is Ankit. And we've known each other for a long time. So we were middle school buddies, and then we were college roommates. And we kind of worked together a little bit at Google as well. And we did a company together in the past called Quetra in the mobile analytics space. So just a very long relationship, someone I've known for 25, 30 years. And I started the company together with him in 2019. And the idea was around, really relieving the administrative burden of the healthcare system and really focusing on improving patient outcomes. And we can talk a little bit more about that. But how it started, even though Ankit and I had, very much a tech background, is we'd always been chatting for a while around kind of working in an area where we can make a lot of impact on the overall ecosystem and where can we really drive the most impact. And related to that, I think we've been chatting about, healthcare for a long time. And Ankit's wife, Shelby, actually works in healthcare as well. And I think she had been telling us that, the amount of phone calls that happen in the US healthcare system is huge. And Ankit and I have been very passionate about AI for a long time. So, we really worked on kind of AI from the search perspective. I've worked on kind of AI from a security perspective. So we've been very passionate about conversational AI and how to kind of apply it. And at the same time, kind of voice and conversational AI is really taking off. And we got this insight from the folks that we know about how many phone calls happen in the US healthcare system. And that's when we kind of really started it. But because we were outsiders at that point, at least, right, I think we really wanted to do a lot of market research. So I remember Ankit and I going to different local pharmacies and going to our friends who are doctors, going to our friends who are providers, payers, pharmacists, and kind of really asking them, hey, do you actually do a lot of phone calls every day? And the answer we got was, yes, we do a ton of phone calls every day. And that gave us the market insight and the confidence that this was such a huge problem to solve.
And then with your background, deeply technical, were you also working in AI with previous companies, or was this kind of like you were always up to date with the latest on AI because it's a personal passion?
Yeah, I think both Ankit and I have been deep technologists, right? And so before Infinitus, I've been at NVIDIA, Snap, Google, and all of those institutions. Part of my work has been on the security side or the infrastructure side, but also partly on the AI side. When kind of my first internship, I think in college, was in the search relevancy team at Yahoo. So just been part of kind of AI, but just part of all different technology platforms, right? And we've been very up to date as a result of that. And so I think the technology part of it came kind of natural, but I think the healthcare part was new for us.
And I was curious, I was looking through your background and you seem to move seamlessly between these top tech companies. I mean, you mentioned NVIDIA and Google and Snap, and you were there, maybe like 1 to 2 to 3 years at a time. Was it that people just knew Shyam and they were like, yeah, we want him on our team? And so you would pretty much just kind of where you were needed, you could move. It seemed like there wasn't as much friction for you to do that.
Yeah, I think I'm very kind of passionate on the engineering side of things. And so even with these institutions, right, I think there were kind of different projects. So at NVIDIA, it was really about CPU design. At Google, it was a lot on the security side. And at NVIDIA, previously on kind of even GPU design. And at Google, in addition to kind of security, I also got a chance to work on VR, kind of the physics and math behind it. And I think it comes from probably just, really being excited about these things. I think I just enjoy it so much that it feels like even if there's a little bit of gap to kind of work on the next thing, reading up at night and weekends to kind of figure that area out. I think just enjoy, all the different aspects of technology. And so when you have that kind of really interest in everything you do, I think it comes naturally. And yeah, a lot of it has come from, people I know. I think the security team at Snap had a few folks from the security team at Google. And so I was able to kind of, go easily work there. So yeah, combination of network, but also just a passion that I think, not kind of being attached to one area of technology, but just being able to kind of jump into whatever is new and being passionate about it, I think has really helped me on my personal career journey for sure.
Mm-hmm. And how different has it been co-leading your own company versus your prior roles?
Yeah, I think, the biggest probably change is a focus on more than just the technology, right? So I think at Infinitus, I focus on the product and technology parts of the organization. And that, previous roles also kind of mainly on the technology area of things. But because it's, a co-founder role and it's an early stage startup where not just the co-founders, even all the engineers on our team are very much business oriented. I think having that eye on kind of what does the customer need, kind of being able to actually interact with every customer, asking them questions, attending customer calls and one understanding the problems but also understanding the concerns. A lot of customers have worries about security from a healthcare perspective, right? So being able to understand what those concerns are and then weaving them into our product roadmap but also explaining how we are secure. So that opportunity to kind of deeply interact with customers and be not just part of the engineering organization but help the sales organization, help the customer, that part has been new and very rewarding as well.
And you've attracted some of the best investors and you've got a significant amount of capital. What's been the biggest challenge in terms of scaling? If you had to identify what your current constraint or constraints are to truly scaling, what would those be?
I think it's always been for us engineering talent and in my perspective, right? And we've hired some of the best engineers and we continue to hire them. But one of the really amazing things that we have is we work with a lot of the top S&P 500 companies in healthcare. So I think more than half of the healthcare companies in S&P 500, I think we work with. And it's amazing. And one of the things that happens as a result is that those companies don't want to work with a lot of vendors, right? They want to work with few companies that they trust. And the outcome of that is a desire for Infinitus to build more and more products over time. So, we focus on the conversational AI, focus on the phone calls, but customers want additional types of phone calls than the ones we started with, or they might want things around computer vision, document parsing, and things like that, right? And to be able to really serve our customers to the extent that they would like us to requires building, a large engineering team and one that's motivated and excited and can do 0 to 1 and new products in many different areas. And requires building a very AI forward team, right? AI talent is hard to find, and so that's the biggest challenge is getting more folks in the door who can are passionate about healthcare, passionate about AI, and then working with our customers to build additional products. So that motion is definitely the most challenging and most interesting part of scaling up Infinitus.
Mm-hmm. And now with your engineers, I presume they're also leveraging AI with their coding. What would you say is, and this is kind of, somewhat of a crude way of understanding it, but what percentage kind of increase in productivity has AI given your own engineering department?
I think it really varies, but we're starting to see probably 20-30% productivity increase for us. But we've been using AI for a while. So I think, even very early, our team adopted coding assistance tools, ChatGPT kind of type tools. And now we're starting to use things that are kind of baked into the IDE or the editor that engineers use to write code itself. And we've seen a lot of productivity. The places where we see the most is actually in helping in writing tests and writing tools. So there's kind of the core production part of systems, but engineers need to test their code a lot. They need to build a lot of auxiliary tools to make sure that the administrative components of their work go well. And those are the areas where we see a massive productivity boost, maybe even like 50 to 100%. On the production side, it's probably, still that 20, 30%. And the reason is sometimes when you're building an administrative tool or a testing tool, you can basically trust the output as long as it kind of behaves properly. Whereas when your production systems, you really want to be very careful. So even if you have some assistance from AI, you're doing a lot of code reviews and things like that. But I think what we probably find is that engineers get to work on the problems they want to work on a lot more. Not only is there kind of this productivity boost, massive on the tools, a little bit of productivity boost on the production systems, there's probably also a much higher happiness level amongst engineers because I think you get to really focus on the problems that you care about.
Just reading about some of the reviews from customers, I imagine your NPS scores are very high. And what's apparent is the love that people have for your product. And if you're interfacing with an AI persona on the other end, it kind of brings up this question of, can you really develop some type of emotional bond with the AI person you're talking to? How do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's actually happens quite a bit, by the way. So even at Infinitus, where we started off with a voice that's very easily identifiable as a digital assistant and not as a human. I think some people have very empathetic voices or personas for their AI system, but we started out. But I think you see at the end of a lot of calls that we do where we ask the person on the other side, what was your experience chatting with Eva, right? And we get 95+% positive responses. But not only do we get positive responses, we get people who are genuinely happy. They're like, wow, I really had a good time chatting with you. And they feel this magical experience. And I think, the reason it comes, I think, is a precision, right? So oftentimes, the types of calls that we do require a lot of precision in communication, right? So we want to be making sure that we are really identifying what the patient has to pay. Is the patient approved for this treatment? What are the conditions they have, and kind of capture that in a very precise language. And so when you are able to kind of communicate with that precision and always follow the operating procedures for that type of conversation, the person you're calling on the other side is kind of just relishing the fact that this is such a professional conversation, right? It's kind of like watching, NBA game and the player gets an amazing dunk, right? And that kind of feeling when you interact with an AI, which is just so precise, is exciting. And so I don't think people necessarily are empathizing with it from a perspective of this is very human like, but I think they're empathizing with it from admiration of someone just doing a really good job in their professional setting and kind of knocking things out of the park, right? And really, I think the sports analogy is great. Like watching a great dunk is probably how I see a great AI performing.
Well, I can imagine there's a lot of variability in the more traditional sense, the customer service rep, the actual human. There's variability into how they interact with people and their ability to understand what's being asked of them and giving precise answers, whereas you're always operating at 100%. So the customer is always just delighted to be interacting finally with someone who gets it right away.
Exactly. And I think that delight, and I think we use this term magic quite a bit at Infinitus. It's like, watching a great magic trick, right? And you're just delighted by that. And that's the experience, we're seeking to create at Infinitus for sure.
Yeah. Do you operate by a certain philosophy? Like, Jeff Bezos is well known for saying for Amazon, like they're super customer focused and the customer is always going to want their product faster. They're always going to want it faster. That's never going to change, right? Do you have like some high level meta philosophies like that?
Yeah, we have a lot of the same philosophies, I would say. I think our probably core value is customer obsession. And I think, really figuring out what does our customers need and working with them. And that DNA drives everything we do at Infinitus. So I think oftentimes you see, companies kind of treating their customers for granted and kind of making the products that they want to build instead of what the customer wants to build. And so what we do though is really try to marry the two. So our customer success and go-to-market teams are kind of sitting with a lot of our big customers every week. And you can imagine how much obsession that requires, right? Like meeting each of your customers every week and asking them, how are things going? What can we improve? And it requires a DNA that you push through the whole company to be able to operate like that. And that's kind of the setting that we do. And those customer success teams then work with kind of our product teams and then kind of identify what are the top things that all our customers are asking for. And then our engineering teams kind of work on that right away. And so this culture of, hey, the customer isn't someone that you're building a product for and just selling, but they're the ones who, are part of us. Like they're the ones who are kind of helping us build this together, and creating that culture is very important for us. So that customer obsession, we have 4 or 5 values that we talk about at Infinitus, but the first one is customer obsession. And I think we percolate that throughout the company.
And having worked at these high level organizations, including the one you're building yourselves, how do you discern who are the best people to work for Infinitus as you're recruiting and identifying candidates? Obviously, everyone has to be intellectually capable, but what are some of the other kind of characteristics you look for?
Yeah, I think we're looking for people who not necessarily have worked in healthcare before. That's always great. And I think that's a super amazing thing to have. But looking for folks who are passionate about healthcare. I think end of the day, healthcare companies are very different from just a traditional technology company, right? There is a lot more customization to do. There's a lot more understanding what the customer needs. If you think of a company like Snap or Google, oftentimes the engineers there, they can build a product for themselves. So they have a lot of intuition, because let's say you're building something for Gmail. You use Gmail. And so you kind of know what could be a good feature or not. And there's a lot of intuition behind it. But if you imagine you're an engineer and you're building a product, for a provider in the Midwest, or you're building it for a patient reimbursement specialist at a pharmaceutical company, the distance between you and them is high. And so you have to have this deep customer empathy and that willingness. And that only comes if you're very passionate about the healthcare space, right? And so I think more than anything, we're looking for folks who really excited to work in healthcare, and even if they haven't done it before.
You mentioned that you grew up, with your co-founder, so you knew him very, very well. While it is common for co-founders to have known each other, I think going all the way back to middle school, was this in the Bay Area as well that you kind of grew up?
Yeah, we both grew up in the West San Jose area and had similar paths before then too. So I think both of us were born in India, and then we both moved around different places, and then ended up in California and in the San Jose area and around middle school.
And was it just like obvious like that you would work well together? Because, some friends well enough that you wouldn't gel in terms of the business context. But, what made that easy to know?
We've been roommates, I think, for 3+ years. So I think, through something like that, you get to interact with someone a lot more than just even a very close friend that you hang out with a lot. I think being a roommate is someone you're basically seeing, a few hours a day, every day for 3 years, right? And I think that gave us a lot of confidence. But I think we've also done school projects together. We have done all of these things. And I think we have very complementary styles, right? Ankit is very passionate on the business and sales side. He has an engineering background, but he has that passion there. And I'm very excited on the engineering side. And I think you kind of marry that. So having similar styles, but also kind of complementary skill sets. And I think it always kind of felt very obvious, I would say. And so we both feel blessed to be having each other as part of this journey.
Excellent. Last two questions. One is, can you tell us about a person who's had a profound influence on you?
Yeah, I would say it's probably my wife, right? And I think Asha is her name. And building a startup is hard work. So you're thinking about it weekends, nights, and your brain is always about the startup. And that obviously, is difficult from a family life perspective. But I think have a lot of support at home. And I think our whole family is kind of into building Infinitus together, and having that kind of support network makes it a lot easier to go ahead with.
Awesome. Last question. Can you tell us about a charity, cause, or other endeavor that you're passionate about?
Yeah, so maybe I'll pick two, one on kind of the personal side, and then one on maybe the work side. So on the personal side, very passionate about water for people. I think it's a water charity that ends up giving water to institutions and countries where water supply is in shortage. And I think it is something that just speaks to my heart. I was fortunate to kind of grow up in a better neighborhood of India when I was there. But even for me, when I was growing up, the neighborhood I was in only had running water 2 hours a week, right? And then you have to kind of fill up that water in a tank and then use it for the rest of the week. And that was the luxury, right? So I could imagine there were communities in that same neighborhood where probably you never had running water. So you'd have to kind of go to some central place, pump, and then take the water back to your house and operate it. So I think it's just something where once you have water, I think a lot of problems get a lot better. So I think something that I'm excited about. On the work side, Infinitus tends to work not just with providers, but also pharmaceutical access programs. And so these are institutions that are trying to figure out for folks with lower incomes, but have specialty medications that are very expensive, and they're underinsured, how did they get access to these medications? And so we do a lot of benefits verifications and things like that to help those foundations figure out how to distribute those copay cards. And it's exciting that, the work we do tends to kind of go back into those kind of institutions. But those are probably the two that have been close to my heart.
Excellent. Well, Shyam, want to thank you so much again for taking the time. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Awesome. Thank you, RJ. It was a wonderful conversation.